welcome to The Difference. Today we're going to be talking about supporting our taonga, our older whānau, people over 65 who are experiencing mental health and or addiction issues. We have two amazing guests here to talk about this topic, both from Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland. Welcome, ladies. First up, we've got Janeta Vasega, a team leader of support workers from Vaka Tautua, Pacifica Community Health, Disability and Social Services provider, and a member of our support worker advisory group at Te Pau. Malualele, Janeta.
Tānofa.
And we've also got Lanie Palm in the studio with us, an older adults community support worker from Equip. How are you?
Good afternoon. I'm very well, thank you.
Lovely to have you both here.
Thank you.
Are you both able to tell me a little bit about the organisations that you work for and how they support older people? Janeta, we'll start with you.
Thanks, Alexia. It's great to be here. Vaka Tautua, we are a Pacific national organisation that provide mental health, social services and disability supports to our Pacific community. In our space that I work, being the team leader for mental health, we work alongside our older peoples who experience mental health and wellbeing distress.
And you've been with Vaka Tautua for how long now?
Just over 4 years.
Just over 4 years,
Yes.
but you've been in the sector for a wee while.
Yeah, we will.
Yeah, we will. And Lanie, are you able to tell us a little bit more about your organisation, Equip?
Yes, thank you for asking. I'm with Equip Mental Health Services. So we try and support older adults in the community that have mental health and addiction stress. And yeah, we're just trying to support them as much as we can and as best as we can.
Yeah, and your organisation actually has a program specifically for supporting older people. Is
Yes,
that right?
for older adults 65 and over. Yeah.
Do you know roughly how many people you support?
Oh, top of my head, I would say at least 60, 70 people.
Are you able to tell me a little bit about how you got into support work at all?
Yes, I can do that. I come from an administration background and as part of my church group, I've always been a little bit involved in the community. So my friend actually gave me a brochure from Equip and said, Lanie, why don't you apply for this role? So I looked at it and I thought, no, I don't know if it's for me. A year later, she already has been working for Equip, so she nudged me again and said, well, why don't you apply? And I thought, well, what have I got to lose? I do want to help people. So I applied, I got the role, and it's the best thing I've ever done. I just regret not doing it earlier. So it's really a passion for me, helping people in the community, especially older people. Yeah.
And how did you go from, did you start off with the older person service?
I started off with the older person, yes.
Yeah. And, what appeals to you about working with older people?
I think because I was close to my grandparents, so I really feel a connection to older people. So I think I just see them as a person and what they bring, to people in general. I think we've got so much to learn from older people and we often underestimate their value. Yeah.
Awesome. And Janeta, how did you get involved in support work at all?
Oh, well, I started off in support work back in the early 2000s, working as a residential support worker. And for the next 10 years, worked in various roles to do with community support work, and then sort of ventured out into other services, areas of work. And fast forward to, I think it was 2001, I came back into the mental health field and started working at Vaka Tautua. Support work has always been a passion of mine, and it's been a great opportunity to come back and now give back. I've normally worked in mainstream organisations and know and value support work is at the heart of the work that we do to serve our communities. And so for me, it has been workforce development at Vaka Tautua. So really trying to promote the role, but also support our support workers coming through. So yeah, just a passion for me. Yeah.
And does working with older people speak to you as well? Is there a personal reason why you love doing this work? Or
I love serving, but for me, I was raised by my grandparents, and so always had a passion for our older mātua. But also just seeing the disadvantages and the barriers that our older people face. And so really am just here to try and make sure that everyone has a fair access to services and gets the right supports. Yeah.
What do you think that support workers who work with older people need to be good at?
I think empathy is an important thing, and caring about older people and really value them and seeing them as a person. And part of our society, I think, sometimes they feel outcasted, just like aside. They've done their role and nobody sees them. They still want to be seen. They still want to be heard.
Completely agree with Lanie. One of the things for our support workers is you've got to be able to listen. A lot of the time, support workers sometimes go into it thinking they have all the answers and they know what's required from what they can see is happening for the older person. But a lot of the times, we really want to be supporting them to keep the skills that they do have. Over time, they will lose their mobility and independence, so we want to encourage them to keep as much as their skills that they do have, and we just want to be supporting them to keep them as long as they can.
Yeah, I want to ask you a little bit more about that, because support work when you're working with older people is quite different from supporting younger people with mental distress and addiction, isn't it? There's different goals that you're working with, and just the whole nature of your support could actually be quite different. Have you got any insights onto the differences?
Well, I think firstly what comes to mind is just the pace is slower, and older people do want to be heard. And I think it's important to keep their mana intact for them. As they deteriorate or they have other physical issues that comes forward and cognitive issues. I think as a support worker, we really want to care and listen and see them and help them still to have their purpose and fulfill that goals that they have, and not as a society tell them what to do. Because sometimes they feel like we boss them around and they don't like that.
Yeah, I think when we're working with younger people, it is about supporting them with becoming independent, having independence and learning those skills to be able to support themselves. But when we're working with our older people, it is actually about helping them maintain what the independence that they do have. And as they move into an area where they start to lose, as I mentioned before, start to lose some of their mobility and their independence, it can be really scary for our mātua. A lot of the time, the support is actually just around talanoa. It's just about that socialisation, talking, being heard, spending time. We have a lot of our mātua who live with families, but really they are still in isolation, because when you have families that go out to work for the whole day, they are at home 8 hours, 9 hours of that day. And so a lot of the time, even though we do have a lot of our older people living with family, they are still on their own and still needing that social engagement.
Yeah, isolation and loneliness is a really big social issue for a lot of people these days. We're increasingly more, apparently connected, but we're actually reverting back to, having very small circles of support around us, and maybe only seeing people through digital channels sometimes. How is that playing out for people who are in our older generations?
From what I have seen, some really take on board the tools and the resources that they're still able to use. And then we have those that they struggle with electronic devices. And so you need to find the balance, and what works for people doesn't necessarily work for all. So some might find online Zooming, engagement, talanoa okay, and then others would prefer to be face-to-face, sitting in a room with someone and physically be able to interact with someone.
Yeah, definitely. I think sometimes technology can be a challenge for them because they're the generation that didn't really grow up with them. And sometimes it's that resistance of the adjustment, switching over to technology that can enhance the communication. So you often find the ones that don't embrace that, they do feel lonely and disconnected from their family, especially if people are overseas or they're not local.
Yeah.
I think definitely that's probably a big difference between supporting the younger people and the older people, because the younger people are so tapped in with technology, whereas the older people, they do prefer that face-to-face service.
So what are some of the kinds of issues that you are seeing older people presenting with?
I think social isolation, as much as we're talking about connection, they don't spontaneously go out and make a new friend. And I think that's really partly the role of a support worker is to come along and help them, walk alongside them and help them with those social connections, to rekindle them, and, tap into the right support group, because not every group is a right fit. So you have to consider culturally mobility limitations, financial limitations even, and transport might be a barrier. They can't get 10 kilometers away from a fantastic group. So you really have to try and accommodate those groups that is quite local for them, where they can actually keep on participating even when our services have come to an end, because we want to help them remain independently.
Yeah, that's completely one of the number one issues that we do see is around that, the isolation and the loneliness. So at Vaka Tautua, we have mātua groups that are language specific. So we have Cook Island, Samoan, Tongan and Fijian groups that run weekly out in the community, that are run by coordinators that are part of their groups. And so these groups, they provide social interaction. Also, with it being in their language, they get the opportunity to talanoa, to make arts and crafts, singing, activities. At the end of each year, we have a mātua market where they can all come. So we have all our groups come together, and they have a big market day where they can sell off all the arts and crafts that they have made and created throughout the year. It's a great opportunity, also a great way for them to collect some extra money for them, but it is also a great way for them to continue connecting with others.
And being part of their community.
Yeah,
giving back. Awesome. So older people are not all the same. They're not a homogenous group. There's lots of diversity. How do you try and support people who come from different backgrounds within your work? Maybe I'll go with you first.
Yeah, I think what helped us is we have a coffee group that we run in our area. We've actually started a new one, and I think it's been running for 2 or 3 months. And what I've seen is people coming from different backgrounds is just to go get past that first barrier and come and attend the group and say, oh, there's other people like me, with those physical aids. Oh, I have a walker. I'm not the only one in a wheelchair. And you can actually see how they change when they come the second time and the third time. It's like their whole demeanor changes and they feel more at ease. And then they actually start to open up about their own mental health issues, and they talk to their buddy next to them. So I think that's been a huge success for us in helping people to break down those isolations. And also I think having multi-generational friendship, because sometimes when you're in the 80 plus category, some of your friends have already passed on and you don't have those younger group friendships that can actually help you and, help you remain in a friendship circle.
And I know, Lanie, you understand the migrant experience as well from your own journey, but you've also talked in the prep session for this episode a little bit about, your passion for supporting people who have migrated to New Zealand, and, what are some of the additional kind of support needs for people who are older, who are in those categories?
I think culturally having a connection with people really opens up their hearts, and also, getting past language barriers. But I think at the heart, people really want social connection. and they want people that can identify with them in terms of the struggles that they go through. What has worked well with us in our group is when we ask people where they were born, because often people won't easily spontaneously say where they're from. And once that person says, oh, I'm from the UK or I'm from South Africa, there's that immediate connection and people just start to engage. So that's almost half of the work done when they find those connections and get past the barrier. Yeah.
What about you, Janeta? Obviously you work in a Pacifica service, but, there's lots of diversity within that, our Pacific, our moana. So, how do you provide culturally specific support to your older people who are accessing your services?
Yeah, with the cultural support, and so a lot of the time we can provide language support. So being able to have someone that speaks in your language come into the home and just tell about their upbringing, and hearing that the support worker knows what they're talking about, because they too may come from the same village or just from the same island, is enough for people to feel connected and feel supported.
When supporting our older tangata whaiora, is it the case that perhaps this is the first time they've encountered mental health and addiction services or accessed? Because, we know that stigma and discrimination around mental health and addiction has reduced. It's not completely gone, but it's reduced over, the last couple of decades with a lot of, awareness raising and stuff. But, do you still find that older people are often harbouring a lot of shame or trying to keep it to themselves?
Yeah, we do find that. And so you've got people now who are older but have actually looked after their children, who have accessed mental health services or had addiction issues. Some who actually haven't accessed any services, so they've actually just dealt with it. But it's all the trauma, all the grief and all the stress and worry from that, and now they're at an older age, it has really affected their well-being. So you'll find a lot of our mātua also still looking after those children who are now adults and have their own families, but they're still relying on their parents. And so accessing mental health now, because when you say mental health, people are just looking at it like, I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy, but it's actually learning that mental health is actually about, your well-being, your overall health. So it's not just about your mental health, it's your physical health as well. It's your wairoa. So, there's lots of complexities, as I said, in regards to support. So sometimes someone comes into one area for support and they end up getting support for 4 or 5 different areas of what's happening for them.
Yeah, I think what I've realised as well is some of the older adults, they have that perceived barrier that they create for themselves now, where they think, oh, the children are too busy with their own lives, they've got careers, and I can't talk to them. So there's that other thing that now creeps up where they don't engage with the children, or they don't want to be a burden. So they often don't want the children to know what they're going through, and they're just looking for somebody to talk to, but they often don't want to talk to their families.
And especially if, like you said before, they've lost friends, and, maybe have not accessed services before, so are not even used to talking about their feelings or what's going on for them. Yeah. It could be quite a new experience and quite challenging, I would imagine, to try and start, especially with a stranger. That's why you're, talking before, Janeta, about, the trust and the relationship building and the time that it takes to create that connection with people is so important, hey?
Yeah, because oftentimes this generation, the older generation, comes from an era where you don't talk about your mental health. It's just get on with it, or toughen up.
Yeah.
So it's also a journey for them trying to open up about their mental health and be comfortable to talk about it.
What about addiction? It's, again, a taboo topic, right, for a lot of people, but it does affect our older people as well, perhaps in different ways from how it affects younger people. But, it might be more of the, the alcohol addiction that people are dealing with. What do you see?
Yeah, so with the alcohol addiction, sometimes that is the tool that they use to actually help them maintain, to stay focused or just to stay on track, and don't look at it as an issue or an addiction. It's just something that they do to help them get through the day. Even a glass a day, a couple of glasses a day is the same for a lot of people who use alcohol as a way just to manage. So what we do try and do is just try and teach people other ways of being able to cope with the stress, and have tools to be able to manage that.
Mm-hmm. And if people have been using, alcohol, for example, for a long time, it's quite hard, I think. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but to change those habits in your later years, especially if you've been doing it for a really long time.
Yeah, because I think sometimes older people use the alcohol as a buddy. It's my friend, and it's to fill that void of loneliness. So they don't really, look at it and think that it's a crutch. It's their friend, and I think as a society we don't really see that alcohol addiction because it's so hidden. You buy it in your grocery store and nobody thinks anything of it. And I think, the case with that then is also the nutrition goes because alcohol's not cheap. So if we can help them to fill the void with social connection, then that dependency on the alcohol might go a little bit down.
And, that kind of brings me to another topic, which, I found really fascinating when we were preparing for this episode, was around dementia, and how it is increasingly being, considered a mental health issue, and therefore people with dementia are being funneled into mental health and addiction services. I used to work in older persons care, and, there was a lot of alcoholic dementia that we used to deal with, and that was generally people who were a lot younger, even before their 60s, who were dealing with that, and it's quite a different kettle of fish. But yeah, dementia is something that, are our support workers who are working with older people equipped to, support people with dementia? Do we need some training around this to kind of get up to the play?
Most definitely, that is what we've seen as an organisation. We've seen a lot more referrals coming through to us for older people with dementia, so people who are in their 60s, 70s, even 80s. And so a lot of the time we need to determine how mobile and how independent people are, because that's not the work that our CSWs are trained in, and that we're moving more towards the personal cares and household tasks that might need to be completed. A lot of the time with these referrals, we still go in and we just make sure that people have got access to other disability services that are available, that they have the extra support that might be needed to help them, because a lot of the time it's more around the carer burnout. And so we are able to provide support to the full-time carers, or those that take care of the older person, and put the supports in there, but just to make sure that they're getting enough support for the matua that who might have the dementia.
That's so important, eh?
Yeah. So just making sure that training is available for our staff also to see the change or the direction and where some of the supports are required now. Yeah.
Yeah, I think with young onset dementia, the thing is that it often presents as depression. So by the time we pick it up, it's 10 years later. I've supported a young adult that had early dementia, and I think what was important for me is to educate myself. So I really found some very good resources online where I could do a course on dementia and the signs of dementia and how to manage that, because there's not a cure for it, unfortunately. So it's quite a sad illness, and it just really, it changes the person. And I think for me it was just important to understand the person behind the dementia, because there was a person there. It's just a matter of discovering them and walk with them and, find out what's important to them, what makes them tick, what was their interest, what was their hobbies, what did they do for a job, Yeah.
Yeah, you'll find a lot of people who do look after their parents are having to finish work. because you can't leave mum or dad now at home on their own where they could stay at home on their own for the day. A lot of the time now, people are having to finish up, and it's all the effects that come with that, having to finish work, the financial barriers that now you're faced with, and all the other things that come along with that, and not having your village around you. So that also is a barrier for a lot of people. And so what also does come up is the option of rest homes, putting your loved one into a rest home. And there are a lot of conversations. I know this is a real hot topic for a lot of families that don't believe putting your parent into a rest home is a good thing, because we should be looking after our parents. And yep, if you have a village around you that can do that, that is. But what about those people that don't have a village around them and it's just them? That they do also need to realise that support is really important, but the care for your loved one is the most important. That they are safe, that they've been looked after, because you're no good if you're also burnt out and unwell yourself. And then there is no one to look after.
Yeah.
Your loved one.
Is this a conversation that as a support worker working with older people and their whānau, that those difficult conversations are things you need to be able to have with people?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, especially if you have the transition phase, because it's important to actually try and, as much as you can, incorporate them in the decision making and help them understand, so that they have that process time once they move into better care. And it's often just really about safety, because people go on a walkabout and they can't find their way back.
Yeah.
And it's very sad to see that happen, when people just don't know how to get back to where they belong.
Yeah.
I mean, there's alarm systems that they use these days, and I suppose GPS monitoring. But when you have dementia, you don't understand what is this new wrist thing that you're wearing. Why is it there? And you want to pull it off. That's, sometimes impractical what happens.
Yeah. I think, this is such an important conversation, because, we have seen way too many stories in the news about our older whānau getting lost, going for a walk and not being found, or not being found until it's too late. And that is devastating. And families are struggling because, then, it might be the time that they've, taken up the opportunity to just have a little bit of respite, and then the guilt that comes with that, It's such a confusing and hard time for families and for the person, with so much confusion around, what is happening to me. That's why, the support that your organisations and the organisations like yours give to people and their families is so important. Do you think that with the inclusion of conditions like dementia coming into the mental health and addiction system and away from perhaps aged care where it used to sit, do you think that we need to make some changes to the way we deliver support to people? We need to upskill our support workforce so that they can handle those situations. And like you were saying before, Janeta, learn more about, personal cares and things, which is not something that is usually done in mental health and addiction spaces.
I think it's more, completely agree in regards to upskilling our staff, the education around what dementia is, how someone can end up with dementia, and just the safety measures around someone who does have dementia. But it's also support workers do need to learn about carer burnout, because that is also it's been around for ages, but it's a new thing for people to actually realise that there is a thing of carer burnout. Just with personal experience with both my grandparents going through dementia, also having an auntie who became the full-time carer of my grandmother, having to finish work. So all the financial complications that came with that. And watching her and her own mental health slide because she was not recognising the triggers, and she just her own way of thinking around things, because also there's the complexities that also come with when your parents own a home. And they have to go into a rest home. There's also the complexities around the asset being taken to use, because those are that's just all the complexities around, and that's a different thing. But also the things that happen with my auntie in regards to if the house was going to get taken, where was she going to live, and all these sorts of things, where she ignored all her own health and ended up becoming unwell herself. And then my grandmother didn't have anyone to look after her. So our village pulled around. But yeah, that was just a little bit too late. So just with my own experiences and seeing what has happened, the way our services are, access to those services, and just also how our families are treated when their loved ones are in hospital, being able to access certain things, the wait times of having to wait for an assessment to get done. The families don't have time to wait if they're just it. They just have to try and keep going, and sometimes that's not always possible, and you see things that happen to your family members in the process of waiting. So yeah, there needs to be a big shift in how things are done with services like ours. We can't do everything. We don't have enough people to be able to provide those supports, but we definitely try and do what we can in the people that we do help.
And when, all that carer burnout and, the families are so under stress, and then the support workers as well who are working with people. We talked in last season about vicarious trauma and worker wellbeing. That is something that, when people are stretched, those are real worries. And unfortunately, when those things are happening, it increases the likelihood of abuse. And our older adults are often at the receiving end of that, just out of pure frustration for, people who are either not equipped, or they're just too stretched, and they have so much stress and they're not sleeping, how those abusive situations can crop up, and, often with tragic consequences.
That is, one of those things that does happen. And I don't want to downplay that, but yeah, you see it quite often, and it is hidden. But, when the family doesn't have those resources in place, and doesn't have the education around the support that is available, or being able to recognise that this is not right,
Yeah, because I think often community support is not a 24/7 service. We'll go in for an hour or two and help. And often I think the family do need more support, because how do they navigate moving forward as a family when there's this huge dependence that this person is starting to have when they're unwell. And I think that is where the rest homes do play a part, negatively or positively, so they do play a part. I've seen that with my person that I supported, that they had to move her because she was getting lost in the neighborhood. She couldn't find a way back home. And the family becomes so worried, where's grandma, where's mom? And what do you do?
Have you seen any differences between tangata whaiora who have become older and people who have never accessed services and then develop mental health or addiction needs as they age? What are, in terms of issues, how does the support that they need sometimes differ?
I think people that's been in our service are more likely to accept support because for them they know it, whereas the person that comes in later are a bit more hesitant and they don't know what to expect. And because they haven't have an experience with us, whether positive or negative, they might have a little bit more of a barrier before they open up to the service, or they might be selective in what they need. Yeah.
In New Zealand, we've got an ageing population, and there's been all this focus on whether or not our society is going to be able to properly support our older people when they get to be an even bigger proportion of the population. I think that this is an issue that needs more attention. I think that, our older people deserve the very best support when they get to their latter years. And I just hope that, we can, maybe through this episode or the other work that we're all doing, we can raise some awareness about, the need to support older people to live with dignity. I think that it's something that we need a lot more focus on. And I just want to thank you both for coming in today and sharing a little bit about your mahi and your why you do this work. And thank you for the work that you do.
Kapa, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to The Difference. We'd love to hear what you think about the podcast and where it is reaching. If you've got a few minutes, please do leave us a comment in the comments section. Tell us what role you're in and which bits of the podcast you've found useful. It'll help us to know if we're pitching things right or picking topics that resonate with the sector. Kia ora.